"You can stop panicking, human. I'm here to rescue you," the sexy alien girl said. Jax laughed, a raw, cracked sound that scraped his throat. "Rescue me? Honey, you're about 3 hours and one shitty back alley deal too late for a rescue." The chains holding his wrists to the igneous rock wall rattled with the motion, the iron cuffs biting into his skin. He was shirtless, his worn cargo pants the only thing he had left. The air smelled of sulfur and ozone, thick and hot like the inside of a furnace. Dim red light pulsed from deep within the cave, casting long, dancing shadows. An arena. He'd been sold to a fucking gladiator pit on a volcanic moon, forgotten by every decent mapmaker in the galaxy. His panic had burned out hours ago, leaving behind a bitter, sarcastic residue. That was his sweet spot, the place he lived in. The woman who'd spoken stood in the cave entrance, a silhouette against the violent crimson sky of this hellhole. She stepped into the glow. She wasn't human, not even close. Her skin was a startling shade of turquoise, marked with intricate, darker patterns that swirled over her arms and torso. She wore a harness of black leather and metal, barely covering a body that was all lean muscle and deadly curves. Long, bone-white hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes were molten gold. They tracked him like a predator. "You are the human," she stated, her voice a low, resonant purr that vibrated in his bones. It was the same voice from the entrance, the one offering a rescue he knew was bullshit. "Jax," he grunted, "and you're the welcoming committee? The fruit basket is a nice touch, but I'm more of a whiskey guy." He tugged at the chains again. Useless. She tilted her head, a slow, deliberate motion. A flicker of something, amusement, curiosity, danced in those gold eyes. "I do not have this whiskey. I have a blade and a proposition." She unhooked a wicked-looking knife from her hip, its edge shimmering even in the dim light. "You are my trial prey. Your panic would have been a worthy offering to the cinder gods. Your noise is a poor substitute." "Yeah, well, my customer satisfaction scores have been slipping lately." Jax shot back, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it, the main event. "So what's the deal, gorgeous? You kill me, you get a prize, a toaster, a brand new fusion-powered speeder?" Her lips, a shade darker than her skin, curved into a smirk. It was a terrifyingly beautiful sight. "I hunt you. If you survive until the twin suns set over the molten spire, the trial is complete. I am proven worthy. And you are proven worthy of me." Jack stared. "Proven worthy of you? What the fuck does that mean? Do I get a fucking medal? A chew toy?" "It means you live," she said, her voice dropping, becoming more intense. "And you become mine." His blood ran cold, colder than it had any right to in this volcanic shithole. Being a gladiator was one thing. Being a pet was another. "I don't belong to anyone," he snarled, the words tasting like acid. "Especially not some overgrown lizard with a superiority complex." She moved then, crossing the distance between them in a silent, fluid blur that his eyes could barely track. One moment she was by the entrance, the next she was inches from him, the heat from her body washing over his chilled skin. She smelled of ash and strange exotic spice. She raised a hand, her long, turquoise fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Her touch was surprisingly soft, a stark contrast to the sheer power radiating from her. "So much fire in such a fragile shell," she murmured, her golden eyes boring into his. "The mercenaries who sold you said you were clever, defiant. They did not lie. Glad I could live up to the hype," he rasped, refusing to pull away. "Now are you going to get these fucking chains off me, or is this the whole show?" Her smirk widened. "The show is just beginning, little human, and you are the star." She reached behind her, producing a small metallic object, a key. Not for his chains, he realized, but for a high-tech collar in her other hand. "I am Zelia, and your rescue begins now." Zelia unlocked the heavy iron cuffs with a decisive click. The metal fell away, and Jack stumbled forward, rubbing his raw, bleeding wrists. The relief was instantaneous and overwhelming, but it didn't last. Before he could take a full breath, she snapped the other device around his neck. It hummed to life, a low-frequency vibration against his throat, and a thin, crimson line of light appeared on its surface. An energy collar, a leash. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his fingers probing the smooth, unyielding metal. There was no seam, no lock he could feel. "My bond to you," Zelia said, her tone utterly matter-of-fact. She held up a small remote linked to a band on her wrist. "It ensures you do not stray too far from the trial, or from me. If you do," she pressed a button. A jolt of pure, white-hot agony shot through him. His muscles seized. His vision swam in black spots and he collapsed to his knees, gasping. The pain vanished as quickly as it came, leaving him trembling and breathless on the stone floor. "Fuck," he choked out, glaring up at her. "You could have just said." She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "Words are for equals. We are not equals. Not yet. This is a hunt, human. Remember that." She turned and strode toward the cave mouth, her leather harness creaking with the movement. "The trial begins now. The ashen fields stretch between us and the molten spire. You must survive the terrain, the beasts that nest in the glass canyons, and me. Do this and you earn your place." He staggered to his feet, every nerve ending still screaming in protest. "And if I don't, then your bones will bleach in the ash and I will find another to test my worth," she said without a hint of malice. It was just a fact, like gravity or death. She didn't wait for him, forcing him to scramble to follow. The moment he stepped out of the cave, the full force of the world hit him. The air was thin and searing hot, filled with a fine black grit that coated his tongue. Two suns, one a brilliant white and the other a dying red giant, hung in a bruised purple sky. The landscape was a nightmare of jagged black rock, rivers of slow-moving lava, and plains of shifting gray ash. In the distance, a single massive volcano spewed a plume of smoke into the upper atmosphere. The molten spire. "Charming place," Jax muttered, shielding his eyes. "You guys get a lot of tourists?" "Only the unwilling," Zelia replied, her golden eyes scanning the horizon. She seemed perfectly at home in this lethal environment. Her turquoise skin almost seemed to absorb the harsh light, giving it a faint inner luminescence. She started walking, her pace steady and relentless. Jax was forced to jog to keep up, the leash a constant, terrifying reminder of her control. "So, what are the rules of this little game?" he panted, the ash already clogging his lungs. "I run, you chase. We hold hands and sing campfire songs. You try to live. I try to prove you are worthy of living," she corrected him. "I will give you a head start. The first geyser field is a good place for a weak creature to find a quick death." She pointed with her chin towards a section of the plains where plumes of steam erupted from the ground at random intervals. "I suggest you avoid it." She stopped, turning to face him fully. "I will grant you one cycle of the small sun's shadow before I begin my pursuit. Use the time wisely, or don't. It will make my victory all the sweeter." Without another word, she sat down on a rock, crossing her legs and resting her blade across her lap. Her eyes closed, meditating, or just fucking with him. Jax stared at her, then at the hellscape stretching before him. A head start, in a place designed to kill him. "Fuck my life," he whispered, and then he started to run. He didn't run blindly. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. He was a scavenger, a survivor. His primary assets weren't strength or speed, but wits and a deep, abiding sense of cynical opportunism. The geyser field Zelia had warned him away from was his first destination. The most obvious danger was often the best place to hide. He skirted the edges, the ground vibrating beneath his worn boots, blasts of superheated steam erupting with deafening hisses. He found what he was looking for, a dense patch of crystalline flora, sharp as razors and growing in tight, tangled clusters near the vents. The heat made them brittle. Perfect. He spent a precious 20 minutes weaving a tripwire from a strip of his own clothing, rigging it to a precariously balanced shelf of the obsidian-like crystals. It was a stupid, simple trap. It wouldn't stop a warrior like her, not for a second. But it wasn't meant to stop her. It was meant to piss her off. To show he wasn't just prey. He was a pain in the ass. He found a shallow ravine carved by ancient lava flows and hunkered down, waiting. The small sun crawled across the sky, its light weak against the glare of the red giant. He didn't have to wait long. He felt her presence before he saw her, a subtle shift in the oppressive atmosphere. Then, a flash of turquoise and white against the gray ash. She was moving with an unnatural grace, her feet barely seeming to touch the ground. She wasn't running. She was flowing, a river of deadly intent. She entered the geyser field without hesitation, navigating the erupting steam vents as if they were a minor inconvenience. Her golden eyes were scanning, not for him, but for his trail. She was good, fucking terrifyingly good. She was almost past his trap when her boot snagged the line. It was almost too subtle to see. The line snapped. The shelf of crystals shuddered, then collapsed in a shower of glittering, razor-sharp shards right where she had been a split second before. She wasn't there. She had moved, a lateral leap of impossible speed, landing silently a dozen feet away, but she hadn't been fast enough. A single shard had sliced across her thigh, a thin line of dark, purplish blood welling up against her turquoise skin. She looked at the wound. Then she looked at the collapsed trap. Then her golden eyes, now burning with a new intensity, locked directly onto his hiding place. Jax's stomach plummeted, busted. She stalked toward his ravine, and he knew running was pointless. He stood up, hands raised in a gesture of mock surrender. "You missed a spot," he said, his voice shakier than he wanted. She stopped at the edge of the ravine, looking down at him. A slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a friendly one. "Clever," she purred. "You made me bleed." "No prey has ever made me bleed." Before he could formulate a suitably sarcastic reply, she launched herself into the ravine. She didn't jump. She pounced. He had a brief, terrifying impression of a flying body, all muscle and fury. And then she slammed into him. The impact drove the air from his lungs, and they went down in a tangle of limbs, his back hitting the hard-packed ash. She landed on top of him, straddling his hips, her weight pinning him effortlessly. Her face was inches from his, those molten gold eyes blazing. "That was a mistake, human," she growled, the vibration running through his entire body. He was trapped, her thighs like steel clamps on either side of him, her hands pinning his wrists to the ground. Adrenaline and something else, something hot and dark, flooded his system. He was completely at her mercy. "Yeah, well," he wheezed, a wild, reckless grin splitting his face. "If you think that was good, you should stick around. Just getting warmed up. I'll rock your whole damn world." The air crackled. Her eyes widened, the fury replaced by a sudden, stunning stillness. Her grip on his wrists loosened. "Rock my world?" she repeated, the words slow and deliberate, as if tasting them. "A primitive yet direct declaration of mating challenge." Jax's grin froze on his face. What now?" "It is an old form," she continued, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. "A challenge of pleasure prowess. To be settled with the body, not the blade." She leaned closer, her breath warm against his lips. "Challenge accepted, Jax." Jax's brain stalled, rebooted, and then crashed entirely. Whoa, hold on," he stammered, trying to push himself up. It was like trying to move a mountain. "That's not, it's just a thing we say. It means like, I'm gonna impress you, or, fuck up your day, depending on context." Zelia tilted her head, a gesture of deep concentration. "So you wish to fuck up my day? Is this another term for the mating rite? A contest of disruption? No, Jesus, it's slang, idioms, metaphors. Look, can you just get off me?" The heat of her body was seeping through his clothes, branding him. The pressure of her hips pinning him down was doing things to his own body that were deeply, profoundly inconvenient given the circumstances. Suddenly, the ground shuddered violently. A low, guttural roar echoed from the sky, and the light dimmed. Ash thick and black began to fall, not like snow, but in heavy, choking sheets. "Ash storm," Zelia grunted, her attention snapping from their misunderstanding to the environment. "We need shelter. Now." She rolled off him in a single fluid motion and grabbed his arm, hauling him to his feet. The energy collar gave a warning hum as he instinctively pulled back. "Move, human," she ordered, her voice cutting through the growing roar of the storm. The world was disappearing into a swirling vortex of black grit. Visibility dropped to a few feet. The air became unbreathable, a toxic soup of rock and sulfur. She dragged him along, her grip like iron. She seemed to know where she was going, navigating by some internal compass he lacked. They stumbled into a narrow crevice between two massive basalt columns just as the storm hit its peak. The wind howled outside, a physical force that seemed intent on scouring the flesh from their bones. Inside their cramped shelter, it was suddenly quiet. The only sounds their own ragged breathing and the faint hum of his collar. They were pressed together, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. There was nowhere else to go. The space was barely big enough for one person, let alone two. He could feel the warmth of her skin, the solid muscle of her thigh against his. The spicy, ash-like scent of her filled his senses. After a moment, Zelia let out a hissed breath and leaned against the rock wall, favoring her injured leg. The cut from his trap was still weeping that dark purplish blood. Without thinking, Jax ripped another strip of fabric from the hem of his already tattered pants. "Here," he muttered, holding it out. She looked from the grubby piece of cloth to his face. Her golden eyes narrowed in suspicion. "A gift? What is the tribute for?" "It's not tribute, for fuck's sake. It's a bandage. Your leg is bleeding, you wrap it. The bleeding stops, it's not a complicated system." She watched him for a long moment, then slowly, hesitantly, took the cloth. She wrapped it expertly around her thigh, her movements economical and precise. When she was done, she didn't thank him. She just stared at him. "Your customs are inefficient," she said, full of pointless gestures. "Yeah, well, we call it not being a complete asshole. It's a niche market, but it has its followers," he retorted, leaning his head back against the cool rock. The proximity was making his skin crawl, every nerve ending hyper-aware of her. "Why are you so defiant?" she asked, her voice softer now, stripped of its commanding edge by their forced intimacy. "The others who come for the trials, they scream, they beg, they run in fear. You run with purpose, you fight back with tricks, you offer aid when I am injured. It is illogical." Jax let out a short, humorless laugh. "Panic is a waste of energy. Begging is for people who think it'll work. And I wasn't aiding you, I was preventing property damage. You go and bleed out on me. Your boss is gonna take it out of my security deposit." He was rambling, talking to fill the silence, to push her away with a wall of words. But in the dim, confined space, the sarcasm felt thin, brittle. "I have no boss," she said quietly. "I have the elders. They demand I prove my bloodline is strong. This trial, it is my final crucible. If I fail, I am exiled. My name is struck from the histories. It is a fate worse than death." He glanced at her. In the shadows, with the storm raging outside, he saw something in her face he hadn't seen before. Not arrogance, not dominance, pressure. The weight of 1,000 generations on her shoulders. For the first time, she didn't look like a predator. She looked like a prisoner, same as him, just with a prettier cage. The ash storm raged for what felt like an eternity. The cramped crevice became a pressure cooker of tension and shared body heat. The air was thick with the scent of her, of him, of the sulfurous world outside. Jax's sarcasm had finally run dry, leaving a raw, unnerving silence between them. He was acutely aware of every slight shift of her weight, the sound of her breathing, the sheer, dangerous fact of her presence. Then, a new sound cut through the howl of the wind. A rhythmic, metallic clank. It was faint at first, then grew closer. Zelia's head snapped up, her body going rigid. She pressed her ear to the rock wall, her golden eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Jax whispered. "Mercenaries," she hissed, the word a venomous curse. "The ones who brought you, they're using magnetic clamps to scale the rock face." "What the hell do they want?" Jax asked, his own blood running cold. "They got paid." "They are traitors and scavengers," she spat, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her blade. "They sell prey for the trials, then they hunt the hunters. A warrior of my bloodline would fetch a high price on the black market, for breeding stock or for slaughter." A fresh wave of fury and disgust washed over Jax. He was just the bait. "They are close," Zelia whispered, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Two of them, just outside the crevice." She looked at him, her gaze sharp and calculating. "When I move, stay down. You are a liability in a real fight." Before he could object, the shadow of a helmeted head appeared at the opening of their shelter. A high-powered blaster rifle swept into the space. "Well, well, A voice crackled through a distorted comm unit. "Look what we found. The pretty blue princess and her pet. Your little game is over, darling. Time to come with us." Zelia exploded into motion. She wasn't a warrior anymore. She was a natural disaster. She slammed her hand against the mercenary's rifle, deflecting the barrel upwards just as it fired. A beam of superheated plasma seared the rock ceiling, showering them with molten droplets. She drove her knife into the weak spot at the Merc's armored collar. A brutal, efficient thrust. He gurgled, collapsing backward out of the crevice. But the second one was already there. He opened fire, the blaster bolts impacting the rock around the entrance, spraying stone shards everywhere. Zelia was pinned, forced back into the tiny space with Jax. She was magnificent, a whirlwind of turquoise fury, but she was trapped. The Merc was advancing, using his shield to deflect her thrown blade, which clattered uselessly to the ground. Jax watched, his mind racing. He could stay down, let her get captured or killed, and then maybe, just maybe, try to bargain for his own life. It was the smart play, the scavenger play. Fuck the smart play. He saw the Merc's energy shield flicker, its power pack located on his belt. It was a standard-issue Cordelian unit. He'd stripped dozens of them for parts. He knew their flaws. While the Merc's attention was on Zelia, Jax lunged. He didn't go for the weapon. He went for the power pack. He grabbed a loose shard of obsidian from the floor, its edge wickedly sharp, and jammed it hard into the pack's primary energy conduit. It wasn't a subtle move. It was desperate and clumsy, but it worked. The power pack sparked violently, fizzing with an overload of energy. The mercenary's shield collapsed with a loud pop. His eyes widened in surprise under his visor. It was the only opening Zelia needed. She launched herself forward past Jax and slammed her fist into the mercenary's helmet. The transparasteel visor cracked under the force of the blow, and he staggered back, stunned. She didn't stop. It was a brutal, close-quarters beatdown. When it was over, she stood panting over the unconscious form, her chest heaving. She turned to look at Jax, her golden eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else he couldn't name. He was still crouched by the entrance, his hand bleeding from where he'd gripped the obsidian shard. Their eyes met over the body of the fallen mercenary. The dynamic had shattered. He wasn't a liability. He wasn't prey. He'd just saved her life. The immediate threat was gone, but the sound of the firefight would draw more. "We can't stay here," Zelia said, her voice rough with adrenaline. She retrieved her blade, wiping the mercenary's blood from it on his own vest. She looked at Jax, a new grudging respect in her eyes. "Your move was unexpected." "Yeah, I'm full of surprises," Jax retorted, wincing as he looked at the gash on his palm. "Let's get the hell out of here before his friends show up." The ash storm was beginning to subside, the wind dying down to a low moan. They scrambled out of the crevice, leaving the two mercenaries behind. The landscape was coated in a fresh layer of black soot, muffling all sound. But their path forward was blocked. The skirmish had triggered a rock slide, sealing the way they'd been heading. "Shit," Jax breathed. "Another way," Zelia said, pointing. A dark opening in the rock face, barely visible. A lava tube. "It will lead deeper into the mountain's roots. It is dangerous, but it will hide our trail." They plunged into the darkness. The air inside was hot and humid, and the tunnel twisted downward into the earth. The only light came from faint, glowing veins of some mineral embedded in the walls, casting an eerie, phosphorescent green glow. They moved in silence for a long time, the tension a palpable thing between them. It was different now. The hunter-prey dynamic was gone, replaced by an uneasy alliance. The memory of the fight, of him lunging to save her, of her brutal efficiency, hung in the air. The mating challenge he'd accidentally issued felt less like a joke and more like a prophecy. They came to a larger cavern, a geothermal spring bubbling in its center, filling the air with thick steam. The glowing mineral veins were brighter here, illuminating the space in a sickly green light. It was a dead end. "We're trapped," Jax said, the finality of it hitting him like a physical blow. "No," Zelia said, her back to him. She was staring at the pool. "Not trapped. This is a place of power, a hot spring, fed by the mountain's heart, a place for conclusion." She turned to face him. Her golden eyes were blazing, the pupils dilated. The patterns on her turquoise skin seemed to pulse with a faint light of their own. The air grew thick, charged with something more than just heat. "You saved me, human," she said, her voice a low, husky growl. "A debt was created. In my culture, a life debt can only be paid in one of two ways, with a life given in service or with a joining of bodies." Jax's mouth went dry. "We've been over this. It was a misunderstanding." "Was it?" she challenged, taking a step toward him. He instinctively took a step back, his back hitting the cold, damp wall of the cavern. "You issued a mating challenge. You made me bleed in the trial. You fought by my side. These are not the actions of prey. They are the actions of a potential mate." She kept advancing, her movements slow, deliberate, predatory. But this wasn't the hunt from before. This was something else entirely. More dangerous, more intimate. "My world is fire and ash and blood, Jax," she whispered, her voice vibrating with an intensity that shook him to his core. "You promised to rock it. The gods of this mountain have given us the stage. Show me." She was cornering him, her body blocking the only exit. The steam from the spring swirled around her, making her look like a goddess of this underworld. He could feel the raw, primal energy coming off her in waves. It was terrifying, and it was the most intoxicating thing he had ever experienced. His heart hammered in his chest, a frantic drumbeat in the humid silence. All his sarcastic defenses, all his cynical walls, they were melting away in the intense heat of her gaze. This was it. The final test. "I'm not a part of your fucked up rituals," he growled, the words lacking their earlier conviction. Her lips curved into that devastating smirk. "Aren't you?" she purred, now only a breath away. She raised a hand, not to strike, but to trace the line of the energy collar on his neck. Her touch was electric. "You have been from the moment I laid eyes on you." This was not seduction. It was a collision. He met her advance not with submission, but with a surge of his own desperate, defiant energy. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist, stopping her touch on the collar. A silent challenge. Her eyes widened, a flicker of surprise in their golden depths. He didn't back down. He met her gaze, his own filled with a mixture of fear, anger, and a raw, undeniable lust. For a heartbeat, they were locked in a stalemate, a battle of wills played out in the space of a few inches. Then she broke it. She didn't pull away. She surged forward, her other hand grabbing the front of his pants and slammed him against the cavern wall. The impact knocked the wind out of him. Her mouth crashed down on his. It wasn't a kiss. It was an invasion, a claiming. It was brutal and demanding, her lips hard against his, her teeth grazing his skin. He responded in kind, a wave of pure, adrenalized instinct taking over. He wrapped his arms around her, his hands tangling in her long white hair, pulling her impossibly closer. The fight became an embrace. The kiss deepened, a frantic, ravenous exploration. It was a conversation without words, a story of survival and dominance, and a desperate shared spark of life in a world of death. Her hands were everywhere, tearing at the worn fabric of his pants, her sharp nails scraping his skin. He fumbled with the complex clasps of her leather harness, a growl of frustration rumbling in his chest. She ripped the material away herself, baring her turquoise skin to the humid air. Her body was a masterpiece of hard muscle and soft curves, alien and yet overwhelmingly female. The fight moved from the wall to the floor, a tangle of limbs on the damp, mineral-rich earth next to the steaming spring. It was a grappling match fueled by months of fear and a few hours of intense life-or-death proximity. Every touch was a brand, every gasp a surrender. He rolled her onto her back, pinning her for a glorious, fleeting second before she used her powerful legs to flip them over, straddling him with a triumphant hiss. Dominance shifted back and forth, a violent, erotic dance. This was her world, her ritual, but he refused to be a passive participant. He was meeting her ferocity with his own. From Jax's point of view, it was chaos and heat and the overwhelming scent of her. But then, for a moment, the world shifted. Zelia's thoughts bloomed in his mind, or perhaps it was her feelings, a torrent of sensation that was not his own. The view flipped. She felt his unexpected strength, not just physical, but a grit in his soul that matched her own. He wasn't breaking. He was pushing back, demanding to be met as an equal. The elders had taught that the trial prey must submit, that its will must be broken to prove the victor's strength. But this human, his will was a blade against hers, sharpening it, challenging it. The pleasure that ripped through her was terrifying, not the simple satisfaction of conquest, but the earth-shattering thrill of finding a match. This was not the completion of a ritual. This was the beginning of something new, something forbidden and powerful. He drove into her, a raw, desperate act that was both a surrender and a final, defiant claim. She cried out, a sound that was half pain, half ecstasy, her back arching. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, drawing blood. As the pleasure crested, a wave of unbearable intensity. The energy collar around his neck flared with a blinding crimson light. A sharp, electric shock, far more intense than the warning jolt, convulsed through both of them. It wasn't pain. It was a connection. A circuit completing. The collar went dark, the hum dying with a final fizz. It fell from his neck, broken. At the same moment, she bit down hard on his shoulder, her sharp teeth breaking the skin. A mark, a brand, not of ownership, of union. The climax hit them both like a physical blow, a shared explosion that left them breathless and trembling in the green-lit cavern, their bodies slick with sweat and spring water. The fight was over. The silence that followed was heavier than the humid air. They lay tangled together on the cavern floor, the only sounds their ragged breathing and the gentle bubbling of the geothermal spring. Jax's body was a roadmap of new sensations, the sting of her nails on his back, the throb of the bite on his shoulder, the deep ache in his muscles. But the most profound feeling was one of utter, terrifying exposure. He had met her fire with his own, and now the ashes were settling. The sarcastic armor he wore was gone, burned away. He felt raw. He pushed himself up on one elbow, putting a little distance between them. Zilia didn't move. She lay on her back, her white hair fanned out against the dark earth, her golden eyes staring up at the cavern ceiling. The fierce warrior was gone, replaced by someone he didn't recognize. Someone still, confused. "You were not supposed to fight back like that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was stripped of all its command, all its arrogance. It was just quiet. In the right of claiming, the prey submits. Its will is consumed by the victor. Jax scoffed, the sound harsh in the stillness. He sat up fully, turning his back to her for a moment to gather his thoughts, to rebuild some small part of his shattered defenses. "Tough shit," he said, the words coming out rougher than he intended. "I'm no one's prey." He looked at the bite mark on his shoulder. It was already starting to heal, the edges knitting together in a way that wasn't natural for human physiology. A faint, dark pattern, like the ones on her own skin, was beginning to form around the wound. "What the fuck did you do to me?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. She finally sat up, pulling her leather harness around herself, a gesture that seemed more for comfort than modesty. "I marked you," she said, her gaze fixed on the broken collar on the ground. When the bond leash broke, at the moment of joining, it created something else. The mark is a sign of it, a true bond, not of master and prey, but of mates. Jax stared at her, disbelief warring with the undeniable truth of the strange mark blooming on his skin. "Mates? You bit me. We had... I don't even know what the fuck that was. That's not mating, that's a hostile takeover. It is how my people form lasting pairs," she explained, still not looking at him. "Through a contest of wills. One must yield, but you did not yield, and I did not conquer. We met. The elders have no scripture for this. It has never happened." For the first time, he heard genuine fear in her voice. The flawless, dominant warrior was gone. In her place was a young woman who had just broken the most sacred law of her people and had no idea what to do next. A wave of something other than anger washed over him. It wasn't pity. It was a strange, unsettling flicker of empathy. They were both trapped, just in different ways. He let out a long, slow breath. "So, we're screwed then." A dry, mirthless chuckle escaped her lips. "Completely." He looked at her proud, terrified face, at the way she held herself as if expecting a blow. The situation was fucked. It was insane. And a tiny, reckless part of him, The part that had made him set a trap for a super predator was darkly amused. "Well," he said, a ghost of his old smirk returning, "if we're going to be screwed, at least the sex was decent." Her head snapped up, her golden eyes wide with shock. A deep turquoise blush flooded her cheeks. The sex? He'd done it. He'd finally, truly broken through her composure. The great and powerful Zelia, flustered by a crude human word. It was a small, petty victory, but it felt like winning a war. The moment of awkward levity was shattered by the scrape of a boot on rock from the tunnel entrance. A single mercenary stood there, a grim silhouette against the darkness of the lava tube. This one was bigger, wearing heavier armor, a pulse cannon held at the ready. It was the leader. "Impressive," the merc's distorted voice crackled, echoing in the cavern. "You took out my men and it looks like you've been busy. How cozy." His helmeted head swiveled from the two of them to the broken collar on the ground. "Looks like the pet slipped its leash. A pity." The client was paying a premium for a bonded pair. Zelia was on her feet in an instant, her body a coiled spring of lethal intent. She put herself between Jax and the mercenary, a protective stance that was purely instinctual. "Your business here is done, slaver," she snarled. Jax got to his feet beside her, his body aching but humming with a strange new energy from the mark on his shoulder. He felt connected to her. He could feel the cold rage pouring off her as if it were his own. "Actually," the merc said, raising his cannon, "it's just getting better. My original mission was to capture the princess. My new mission is to eliminate a contaminated asset and a rogue breeder. The pay is even better." He fired. A ball of pulsating energy shot toward them. Zelia shoved Jax to the side, diving the other way. The bolt hit the cavern wall where they'd been standing, exploding in a shower of molten rock. This wasn't a skirmish. This was an execution. They were outgunned, trapped in a dead end. "The spring!" Jax yelled, his mind racing, scavenger instincts kicking into high gear. "The minerals in the water, they're conductive." Zelia glanced at the bubbling pool, then back at Jax, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. It wasn't a plan, it was a mad gamble. The merc fired again. They scrambled for cover behind a rock outcropping. "I'll draw his fire," she said, her voice low and urgent. "You find a way to use the water." "What, I'm gonna splash him to death?" Jax shot back, his mind already working the angles. The glowing veins in the rock, they were concentrated around the spring, an energy source, a natural battery. "No," he said, a wild idea forming. "I've got something better." He ripped the remains of his tattered pants, yanking the thin metallic fibers of the emergency heat-sinking thread woven into the fabric. It wasn't much, but it was conductive. "When I yell, hit the ground," he told her. "Trust me." She gave him a single, sharp nod. The trust was absolute. It had been forged in combat and sealed in passion. She burst from behind the rock, a blur of turquoise motion, her blade in hand. She wasn't a target. She was a distraction, a dervish of feints and dodges, forcing the merc to focus on her, to follow her movements. While his attention was on Zelia, Jax scrambled to the edge of the spring. He shoved one end of his makeshift wire deep into a cluster of the glowing mineral veins. He could feel the energy thrumming through it, a dangerous, uncontrolled current. The merc grunted in frustration, unable to land a clean shot on the impossibly agile warrior. He switched his cannon to a wide beam setting, preparing to sweep the whole area. "Now!" Jax screamed. Zelia dropped, hitting the deck without hesitation. Jax flung the other end of the wire into the geothermal spring. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. The entire pool of water erupted, the raw telluric energy from the mineral veins short-circuiting through it. An arc of brilliant green lightning leaped from the water and struck the mercenary's metal armor. His entire body convulsed, his weapon discharging uselessly into the ceiling. He stood frozen for a second, wreathed in emerald energy, before collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut, his armor smoking. Silence. Zelia rose slowly, staring at the downed mercenary, then at Jax. He was still kneeling by the pool, panting, the smell of ozone sharp in the air. They had won. Together. The immediate danger was over, but the future was a vast, terrifying unknown. They stood in the quiet cavern, the body of the mercenary, a testament to their unwilling partnership. Zelia walked over to Jax. her movements slow, almost hesitant. She looked at the gash on his palm from the obsidian shard, then at the livid, patterned mark on his shoulder. "You fight like one of the old blood," she said, her voice laced with awe. "With cleverness and fury, not just brute strength." "You're not so bad yourself," he admitted, his usual sarcasm failing him. For an overgrown lizard, a corner of her mouth twitched. It was almost a smile. "What now?" he asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "We can't stay here, we can't go back. Your people think you're in a sacred trial, and mine think well, they don't think about me at all, which is just how I like it. I cannot return with you as my conquered prey," she stated, touching the mark on his shoulder with her fingertips. Her touch sent a jolt of warmth through him, a pleasant echo of the violent shock from the collar. "The mark proves otherwise. They would know I lied. The elders would have me scourged for tainting the rite. So we run," he said. "Find a ship. Get the hell off this rock. There are a million worlds out there where nobody gives a shit about trial prey or mating bites." She looked at him, and for the first time he saw a profound sadness in her golden eyes. "And live as what? Exiles? Hiding in the shadows like those mercenaries? My name, my bloodline, my entire history is here. It is all I am." He saw her choice then, laid out before her. A life of honorless exile with him, or a return to her people to face certain punishment. It was no choice at all, and it pissed him off. "That's bullshit," he said, his voice sharp. "Your history? Your bloodline? That's not all you are. I've seen you fight, I've been with you. You're more than just a name on a fucking list." He was stepping over a line. He knew it, but he couldn't stop himself. "You're a warrior who was smart enough to trust a smart-ass scavenger in a firefight. You're a woman who was brave enough to meet me, not conquer me. That's who you are. The rest is just stories they told you." She stared at him, her lips parted, a storm of emotions warring in her eyes. He had challenged her physically. He had challenged her sexually. Now he was challenging her very soul. She let out a shuddering breath and seemed to come to a decision. New fire lit her gaze, a resolve that was forged in their shared battle. "You are right," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound strength. "The stories are what they told me. Now, we will give them a new story. A true one." She stood tall, her chin lifted. "I will not present you as my prey. I will not hide you as my shame. I will present you as my chosen mate, the one who challenged me and proved my equal." Jax's eyes widened. "Are you insane? They'll kill us both." "Let them try," she said, a fierce predatory grin spreading across her face. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "My people value strength above all. They value victory. We killed the slavers who hunted me. We survived the storm. We completed the rite, not as their laws dictated, but as our wills demanded. They wanted a victor. They will get two." She held out her hand to him. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, an offer of alliance. His old life was gone. His solitary, scavenging existence had ended the moment she'd walked into that cave. Running was easy. Staying, fighting for this insane, terrifying, magnificent woman, that was the hardest thing he could imagine, and it was the only thing he wanted to do. He took her hand. Her grip was firm, her skin warm. It felt like coming home. "Okay," he said. "We give him a new story. But if I have to sit through a bunch of long, boring ceremonies, I'm out."